Welcome, my name's Sam and this is the Little Greenhouse Creates. Thank you for joining me today, and this is our final card for Twisted in Time stamp set of the week. So this is the stamp set we've been using all week. There are two other videos, one on Monday and one on Wednesday. If you haven't seen them and you'd like to, pop back to those 2 days and you'll find them on YouTube or my Facebook page. But today we're doing a funky fold, and this is it. It's a stash busting card. So in a couple of weeks, or in next week, we will be going live with our 25-26 annual catalogue, and so it's time to get rid of the old stuff and ready for the new. So I've used 3 different pieces of designer series paper to create this card. So it is a card that lifts up like so, and then you can open it up inside, and then if you want to, you can put a white piece of card inside, and there we go. So let's put this aside and I will show you how to create it. So the pieces we need are as follows. I have here crushed curry, which measures 8 inches by 5 3/4. I have scored it at the 4-inch mark, and I have burnished it. I'm then bringing in, let's get rid of this. Here we go. Hang on. So I have a piece of designer series paper, my first piece of designer series paper. This measures 3 3/4 by 5 1/2. I then have a second piece, which is this one, which measures 3 3/4 by 3 3/4, which we're going to cut, and we will do that ourselves in a moment. I then have a piece of cardstock, which measures 3 3/4 by 5 1/2. I have another piece of cardstock. These are all in crushed curry, and this is measuring 2 3/4 by 4 1/4. I then have a piece of designer series paper, which measures 2 1/2 by 4 inches, which will fit onto there. I then have a piece of white cardstock, which is 2 1/4 by 3 3/4. And then last but by no means least, I have a piece of white cardstock, which is 3 1/2 by 5 1/4 for the inside layer. There are lots of measurements there, but if you pop over to my blog tomorrow, all the measurements and the photographs will be there for you to be able to recreate this card. So let's begin. So the first thing we need to do is we're working on our base. I also have, she says, going backwards slightly, I have a scrap of Daffodil Delight. I have a scrap of Wild Wheat, which obviously goes out of stock and out of the catalogue as it was last year's in colour on, today actually. And this is Copper Clay, which is also gone. So you might be able to get both of these on the last chance if you have a look, and if you haven't already got them in your stash and you would like them. These are for cutting out the tree, and I will show you how to do that in a moment. But in the meantime, what we're going to do is we are going to stick down our 3 3/4 by 5 1/2 piece of designer series paper. As you can see, the card base is folded in half. Got my glue, and I'm just going to, oh come on, I can feel you in there. There we go. I'm just going to run the glue down there like so. I'm going to turn it over, give it a wriggle, and there we go. That is correctly in place. Put that aside for a second, and we're bringing in our 3 3/4 by 3 3/4 piece of designer series paper. Now we're going to cut this diagonally in half. So I'm going to pop the top left-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner in the runners. I'm going to bring my cutting blade up so that it is in the middle and push it down. And I find it makes it so much easier to do it that way, and I end up with no corners ruined. So taking each piece in turn, you're going to put the longest part of the straight up to a 1/2 inch mark. Put that there. bring that down, and I'm going to score it with my bone folder just once. I don't want to tear the paper, I just want to create a fold. Okay, so it will look like that. I'm going to do exactly the same with this one. Again, is a 1/2 inch. Put that down, and then bring that first down. Okay, so then we've got, there we are. So I created this card the first time, a couple of years back, I think, and I'm sorry if I am wrong, I think this is a design I first saw by Connie Stewart from Simply Simple Stamping. And I was very impressed with her funky folds. So this is one of the ones I cased. So what I'm going to do is, this will fit, and it's going on the back of this card, here, and we just want to put the glue from one end to there, so we don't want it going over the edges. So I'm literally going to go, come on, just there. Then I'm going to pop this as a folded card, and I'm going to pop that down onto my piece of Designer Series paper. I'm just going to make sure it's in the right place, which it does seem to be. I have slightly gone over the edge here with the glue, so I shall get rid of that. Okay, I'm going to fold it over. With my bone folder, I'm going to score it gently into place. I'm going to turn it over and then just burnish that glue. Okay, and then I'm going to do exactly the same with the other side. So again, some glue. I'm not going to go slightly less at this time. So again, the card opens this way, but with both pieces closed, you're going to rest the card onto that 1/2 inch strip. You're going to bring your paper over, burnish with your bone folder, like so, turn it over, and then you're going to just push that down. Now, the glue seeping through there, I'm not going to worry too much, because the piece of cardstock that measured 3 3/4 by 5.5 is going to be stuck down onto the reverse. So I'm going to just add my glue, and I'm just going to layer that over the top, and it just gives it a slightly more professional look than having it all showing through on the back. So now what we need to do is we need to bring in a pair of sharp scissors, which I've got here, and I'm going to chop off. So this is the spine, this is the opening. So on the spine, I'm going to chop off that section like that, and I'm going to do exactly the same on this one. Okay. However, when it comes to doing the other side, I'm actually going to push those back and open. Oh, look, I did it the other way around. Right, let's do that again, and I can explain what I'm going to do. Right, so this is the spine, this is the opening. I'm going to chop the spine section off with the card base closed. That's 1 and 2. Then I'm going to open the card, and I will cut up that way, because if I do it that way, I'm not going to get this section here overlaid, showing through. So it just means I now need to just trim it. That's 1, 2. There we go. So that is now in place for us. The next thing to do is to take the piece of crushed curry. This piece measures, I think this is the, yeah, it's the 2 3/4 by 4 1/4. And what you're going to do is you're going to aim the left hand corner to the edge of this piece of Designer Series paper, and you're going to do exactly the same with this piece, and that is where the glue is going to go a bit below. So I'm going to take a pencil and to make sure I'm level up, I'm just going to draw a faint line across there. So I know that nothing up here, glue can only stay down here, nothing above. So I'm just going to go down with the glue, Okay, and make sure you're only sticking it on one section. Yes, that is the top section. Good. Then this piece of card can go up and down, and it will measure each of the corners. So this left-hand corner of this rectangle matches up with the side of the triangle on the side. Now, if your pencil shows through, you can just rub it off with a little rubber. Hopefully you won't have pressed too hard so it won't show through. Okay, so now that's done, we can layer the other pieces on top. So we have our designer series paper, which goes on to there. And that lies straight down. Perfect. And hang on, that just looks tiny. That's better. And then I'm going to do exactly the same with my white piece. And then we will create our focal point. So the card can be popped aside for a second. So the first thing I'm going to do is, taking the crumb cake, I am going to run this, the largest of the dies. Now this is a solid die. You're going to run it through the cut and emboss machine, and it will come back looking like that. So this actual piece is Daffodil Delight, not crushed curry. However, I'm going to take my crushed curry, I'm going to take the leaves from this stamp set, and with my big block, and I'll line that up. Pop that on my block. I'm going to ink it up with the crushed curry. I might just check it on my piece of paper. Yep, I'm happy with that. And we'll do it again. Always best to check it and be safe rather than sorry. I'm going to bring this down, and then I'm going to hover the stamp set over the paper I've already die cut. Push that down, and then we've got the leaves on there. I'm then going to take my wild wheat, and I'm going to run it through with this one. Now this is the trunk and branches in the solid version, which is this piece here, and that can now be stuck down. I'm going to use my glue. Come on. Just add dots of glue just to make sure it stays down. This is large enough to be able to do that. Turn that around, pop it down, and then that is in place. And then the last piece, we're going to take the copper clay and put some adhesive sheet on the back, and then we are going to run our finer detailed trunk through the cut and emboss machine. Because the pieces are so small and delicate, I suggest you run it through a couple of times so that it actually cuts through the adhesive sheet. Then getting your little tool, oh wait, I'll get that on there, I'm not quite sure where I need that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to poke it through. It comes out quite easily, and as you can see, if I bring it up, there's lots of tiny pieces here that need to come out. So by simply peeling the adhesive sheet off, I'm not getting myself too gluey, it should pull out majority, if not all, of the die pieces that you don't need. Let's have a look. Doing well. And oh, there's one piece there I don't need. There we go. There we go, that's that bit through. Okay, and I can do the same with this piece. Come on. It is, that's better. Because my wrist doesn't bend as fully as it should do, it's a little bit difficult sometimes to actually get it to do what I need it to do. But you know, we persevere. Okay, and then do the same with this one. Under there. There we go. So let's make sure that piece goes through. Don't need that. Okay, so we've got these pieces here. Now, if this is the case, what I like to do is I bring in my silicone mat and I just push them through because the glue doesn't stick to the silicone mat. It makes life a little easier. And then what we can do now is take the rest of this off. And again, if they don't stick through, you can just poke them through with your pokey tool onto your silicone mat and they should stick. Isn't it weird how for some reasons there are times in your life when you can't think or talk at the same time as you're actually trying to do some focusing on something, which unfortunately doesn't make good video. There we go, perfect. Right, so we can pop all this bit aside now and we can get this to move onto here. So what I like to do is I start with the trunk and I hold it down, okay, and bring it up. I work round with each of the branches and just make sure that they fit in the designated area that they're meant to fit into, and if not, just give them a little help with a finger or a pointy tool. There we go, that's that one. And then they all fit into place correctly. Now this can now be mounted onto our piece of paper. So once again, you only want the glue to be on your white card and nothing higher or lower than your finger marks. And I'm just going to hold my fingers there and I'm just going to do a little bit of gluing there. You can also add a piece to your trunk. Okay, that helps to keep it in place. All right, so let's do that. So the last thing to do is to create a sentiment. Now I did have a piece of white cardstock to do that with, but that seems to have vanished. So let's cut ourselves another piece. It needs to be 2 inches by 1 inch. So there's a piece of white cardstock. I'm going to cut myself a 1 inch strip. And then I'm going to cut it down to 2 inches. I'm going to use the copper clay as the sentiment colour. And again, I'm going to use my Simply Said, but this time I'm going to use the stamp that says best wishes or birthday wishes. So let's get my block. There it is. I'm going to bring in the copper clay. Stamp it up. Check it out. Yep, happy with that. Measure it. There we go. Perfect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to put this up onto dimensionals. Let's just cut that bit. I am going to pop it just down here by the root of the tree, and my aim is to have it to line up with the base of the white and also line up with the piece of paper here. I'll just press that and then that will open like so. And there you go. Again, let's put that white piece inside now while it's open. And that is our funky fold for this Friday. I hope you liked it. It's, as I say, it comes together quite quickly once you've done all the cutting of the pieces. And it is an excellent card for stash busting. So thank you ever so much for joining me this week. I hope you liked all the cards. This is the card created earlier. I hope you liked all the cards this week. Whatever you do for the rest of the weekend, have a wonderful weekend. I hope to catch up with you next Monday, but stay safe and happy crafting. Thank you. Bye.